video is how to prepare the G-Tube feeds. So here's the supplies you will need. There's a 1200 milliliter feed bag. This is a Y-port extension because it has 2 ports. A syringe for flushing the tubing, the food, and the backpack to carry it around in, and the pump. So I'm going to make what would be the second feeding of the day. So we'll open up this bag. So in order to get real food to go through the tube, rather than formula, you have to modify the valve. So this is the cassette that comes on this feed bag. And you have to find the longer blue part. It has a little teardrop shape on it. And you're going to peel this up so that it's not in contact with the clear plastic. So you just pick that off with your finger or use a butter knife until you can pull it up and out of the way. Then there's this tiny little valve here that comes on 2 prongs. And you're going to bend it in the direction away from the prongs. So if the prongs are like this, you don't bend it this way, you bend it this way, or else it's just not going to be easy to get off. And there, it's off, and you can see there's no prongs left. If you leave them on, they might poke a hole in this blue part and cause a leak. So then you just replace the blue part, just pull it back on and try not to poke it. You want to make sure that it comes all the way in contact with the clear plastic. If there's a gap there, it will leak inside the pump machine and cause a mess. So that looks like it's on correctly. Now it's modified. So on the end of this tubing is this part that's called a Christmas tree adapter. You just want to pull off the plastic cap. You don't need that. And then make sure that the adapter is screwed onto the purple part, because this comes off all the way. It's usually screwed on properly, but sometimes it's not. So if you don't do that, you might get a leak. So then we'll take the feed extension, the Y-port extension, open that up, and you'll close the small port. It says med on it, for medicine or flushing with water. And then the larger port is what fits the adapter. So you just push it in to get it in, and it's nice and tight. To take it off, you twist it. And then there's the clip on the bottom. You want to position that kind of about right there. And I'll tell you why later. Maybe a little further, maybe like that. So now we need to get water through the tubing. If you don't prime it with water, then when you put the food in here, it would push all this air into her stomach. So that's why we need water in it. So I'm going to do this over the sink just by pouring water in it. So we'll turn around. So just hold the end of this so it doesn't get on the floor. We'll just put some water in there. And then once you hold the bag up, then the water will start flowing. There it is. And then when you can see that there's no bubbles in the tubing, clamp. This clamp is being a little hard. Clamp it shut, and that will stop the flow. And then just dump out the excess water. Turn this around. Okay, so now there's water through the tubing. If you look, and there's, like, here is what a bubble looks like, air bubble. That's small enough, it's fine, but if it's bigger, you can just run the water through again and just move that along. So I use a washcloth to set this on when I fill it up, because as you can see, it's angled, kind of, it's not straight up, so you need something to prop it up. So now we can get the syringe of water ready. I just pour water in. I just put my hand on the bottom and pour some water in. And then just put this on, and I have to do this over the sink. Just push it, remove your finger and push it on, and then take the air out. Or just use a cup, obviously. Okay. So the Nourish goes through just fine without any blending or anything. I just shake it up, and you can stand it up like that. So we're going to do 800 calories. The other one I'm using is a Real Food Blends. These usually need a run through the blender, just Magic Bullet or something small is fine. This has 340 calories, so to get my 800, I'm going to add some coconut milk that I already measured. So we'll put this one in first. So just tear it off or use kitchen scissors. It doesn't always come off quite right. That's why sometimes I use scissors. And then this bag can kind of collapse on itself in the back. So if you just pour the food in, it might just fill up and spill out. So you have to make sure that you pull it apart a little bit so there's room for the food. So at first, you just need one hand. Just pour it in. And then once you need two hands, then you can set that down, kind of propped up, so that you can squeeze the rest in there. So the Nourish usually comes out pretty well, and you get almost all of it. There's that. I dripped a little, I usually do, so I'll show you how to rinse that off. So this is the Real Food Blends we're going to put in the blender. So we'll just open that up. You can see that these have a thicker consistency than Nourish. So if your hands are clean, which they should be when you start this, it's okay to touch the food. It's not sterile. It's just food going into the stomach, just like making someone a sandwich. So these don't come out quite as well as the Nourish out of the bag. So I'm going to get a spatula and a plate. So what you can do to get it all out is just set it on the plate and use the spatula to push the food out of the bag. And then you have the rest. And then you can just scrape that pretty easily into, well, we're going to put this in here because we're blending it. There. So, add the coconut milk. I really like this brand of coconut milk. So, you want the consistency to become about the same as the Nourish. If you make it too thin by adding too much water, then it just means it's going to take longer to go through, and she doesn't want to be hooked up any longer than she needs to be. And also just adding a bunch of water might make her too full for eating actual calories. So you don't want too much water. So you're going for the consistency of the Nourish. That's just about right. So you could try just blending this, or you could put a little bit of water in. I'll just use some for my syringe. You can always add more if it looks too thick. How you will know it's too thick is that when you hook it up to the pump and start running it, the pump will stop and alarm, and it'll say no flow in or no flow out. In would be no flow from the bag into the pump. Out would be from the pump, from the cassette out. Anyways, if it keeps alarming and there's clogs, then it might be too thick. In which case you could add a little water to the bag and shake it up, or you might have to actually dump the food out and reblend it. So you want to try to get the consistency right. So we'll blend this up. That there doesn't appear to be chunks, like there's a tiny little spot there. I think that's fine. But if you see too many flakes or specks, those are things that will make the alarm go off. So I think that looks pretty good. You can always just use a spoon, or I have a fork, but you can just kind of see what the consistency looks like. See if it looks good enough, and I think that will be fine. And then just put that in here. Oops, there. You can also use that syringe to just squirt along the sides and get a little more of the food out of there. That looks pretty good. So now we're done. Now we need to put the lid on it. So it is a little messy because I spilled, which usually happens. So you want to get the air out of the bag. Mostly, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you blended this too long, or you put something in here that's kind of foamy, then you might have a lot of bubbles, and if that happens, you'll need to let it sit for a while. Or you can kind of see there's a bubble there, you can kind of tap the bag and the bubbles will float up a little bit more. So you could do that, but this is not too bubbly. I think it's fine. Sometimes you add a food and it just ends up making foam, and you might have to actually scrape the foam off. Usually it's not a problem with the bubbles, but so you want to get this air out of here, so you just basically squish it down until just the food is coming in contact with the top. Sometimes these shoulders here can have some bubbles, so you can just squeeze them out. And then you want to get it close to the top, but a little room to put the lid on. So the lid goes on, you just set it on and kind of turn it, but then sometimes you have to kind of push it down. Then we need to rinse this off, especially these little notches get food stuck in it, and I spilled some on the bag. So you can just bring it to the sink, hold the end again so it doesn't get dropped on the floor and dirty. Turn around to the sink. So we'll just rinse the whole thing off. Turn around. So that is ready to go. There it is. So she knows how to put it in the bag, but can always do it for her. I'm going to rinse my syringe too. So here's the backpack that she uses just to carry it on the go. And there's this handy metal ruler, which is just to make the backpack more rigid. So if it's not rigid, then when you put the food in here, if it's too heavy, it'll just kind of collapse, and could make it clog, and it's kind of frustrating. So put this in here, and then let's see, this Velcro at the top holds the bag, so put it kind of below the food and just Velcro it like that. You can just put that over. But if the bag is really full, you won't have room to fold it over. Really right. So then we just zip it up. Just zip the side. There is this tubing that comes out. You can feed the whole thing through the backpack out this hole, but I don't think that's really necessary. It can just kind of hang out the side, so that's what I do. So then the pump goes in the very front pocket. So you want to, I've got a strap in the way. You want to load this cassette into the pump. There's a little button here to open the door. And then you can't put it in wrong, it just won't go. So just put the blue part around the black wheel and then pull. Put the cassette right in there and then shut the door. So then you put this in the backpack, just pull the top Velcro and Velcro the bottom. Don't squish your bag, especially if it's really full. You just might open it up and cause a mess. So she knows how to operate the pump, but I'll show you. So turn it on, and I'll just unvelcro it so you can see. You just have to wait for it to run through all those things until it comes to showing you the rate. So you can change the rate by pushing the button that says rate/dose. This is the dose, this is the rate. So it just goes back and forth. The dose stays at infinity, meaning we don't want a certain amount to go in. We want to just put everything in the bag into her. So for dose, 600 is the maximum. You could reduce the milliliters per hour. We usually keep it at 6, but if she's feeling, kind of full, but she still needs her tube, or she's feeling kind of sick to her stomach, you can ask if she'd like to reduce her rate. Then there's the prime button, which is important if there's a clog and this is saying there's no flow in or no flow out. You can hold the prime button and it will run the machine without any brakes to kind of move things through. So those are the main, and then there's just run or pause and on or off, that's it. So we'll turn that off. So that's how it goes. She knows how to attach it to herself, but she'll line up this black line right here with the line on her button, and then turn it more than 180 degrees to kind of lock it. And then this part is locked in, so it's at a 90-degree angle like that. And then she uses these stickers, these grip locks. So this is in her button. Her sticker is here, and that's why you want the clip over here, because if it's right here, it's in the way of her sticker. So she'll put that on, she'll release the clip, and then turn the machine on. So then when it's done and it's time to flush this, she will turn it off and close the clip. Then she usually flushes it herself, but sometimes she needs help. So this little med port is what you would open to put the syringe in to flush it. So one thing about flushing is her stomach has a lot of back pressure sometimes. So you don't want to just unclip this and leave it. You want to unclip it right when you're pushing the syringe, or else when you unclip this, the food will come back through the tube, which is not really a problem, but she doesn't like it. It kind of freaks her out. So you just want to unclip it right when you're going to push the water in. She usually does that herself, but if there's a lot of back pressure, this might be too much for her to handle all at once. So she may want to operate the clip and have you do the syringe. She can tell you, when she's ready or when to stop or whatnot. But that's just to, not really to flush the tubing, it's to flush her button, because you don't want to just take this off and then her button has food in it. So when you're all done, she'll disconnect this from her button, and then so I use one bag per day, one of the feed bags. So if it was, if she comes not having had a feed and you're doing a first feed, then you'll have a new bag. The extension though is, I only get one per about every 5 days. So you might get a used extension. And then if it is the second feeding of the day, then I'll have already used the bag. So you'll come with a bag that's got food residue in it. I won't even flush the tubing because you will prepare it just the same way. So you put water in the tubing, so you'll be flushing things out. Yeah, the Nourish has a 12-hour hang time, so you can open the pouch, put it in the feed bag, and it can be good for 12 hours without refrigeration. That's why I usually do Nourish for the first feed. For the second feeding, if you're adding real food blends or coconut milk or any other food, then when you're done with the bag, it needs to be refrigerated if you're going to be using it again. But if it's the second feed, you usually won't need to use the bag again, so you can just throw it away. But you would need to refrigerate it if you gave something other than Nourish for the first feed. Like maybe she ate really well for lunch and she only needed 200 calories and you didn't want to open a bag of Nourish. So just give her a little real food and then just take the whole thing off and put it in the fridge. To take it off, you just open the door and just pull that off. And then in the backpack, you'll just unvelcro it. You can just take this whole pile of stuff. Usually I set it on a plate just to keep the end clean and just stick it in the fridge. So that's what you would do with a bag that needs to still stay fresh. If this is not going to be used again today, this extension, then you should clean it. So just disconnect it and open the clamp and the ports and just run water through it. If it looks like, you can use a syringe to squirt the water through. If it's not very clean and there's stuff in it, then you can drop a little dish soap in it. Just try to rinse it really well. And sometimes it just doesn't look really clean, but just do your best. So if you didn't want to use the pump, maybe you just had a little bit of food to give, or the power was out and it wasn't charged, I don't know. You can just use a syringe. So this is the syringe that you would use for a bolus feeding. A bolus meaning a large amount at one time, rather than running it slowly with the pump. So how you would do that is you would just use the extension, still connect that to her button, and then right here, this fits just like the Christmas tree adapter, this syringe. So you just stick it in there and you would just squirt the food in. You would have this primed with water first. Yeah, it's a little tricky, I think. It takes a lot of hand pressure to get the food in, and This is not a lot of food, so it's going to take quite a few syringes. It's not actually that much of a time saver. And you have to be a little careful when you stop the syringe and pull it in and out. You can get air bubbles, and you might have to keep disconnecting this and flushing it with water. It's a little hard. Another thing about flushing, if say your bag of food is just not running really well for some reason and there's a whole bunch of air in the tube and you need to just stop, you could, so the extension would be, this would be on. You could detach this from her button, and you could hold the, so the cassette will be in the pump. You could hold the prime button and it will just push the food through. You can just prime this into the sink just to get the clog through. But if you feel like there's a lot of air and you're losing a lot of food, you can open the cap, stick this in there while you're priming it, and then you're just putting the food into the feed bag. So that's something you can do if you are having to prime it a lot. And I think that is it.